Everyone tells you a fuel crisis bankrupted Pan Am. Neat story, also wrong. The fuel crisis was the shove, but Pan Am was already standing right at the edge of the cliff, and it walked there on purpose, years earlier, chasing the most ambitious bet in the history of flying. Let me show you how the company that basically invented modern air travel quietly engineered its own funeral. Start with the man, Juan Trippe. He founded Pan American Airways in 1927, flying mail between Key West and Havana. One tiny route, rickety planes. But Trippe never thought small. He thought like a conqueror leaning over a map of the world. Through the 30s and 40s, Pan Am became America's flag carrier to the planet. The flying boats, the great clippers crossing whole oceans. If you flew internationally, odds are you flew Pan Am. It wasn't really an airline anymore. It was a symbol of American reach stamped on a boarding pass. Then came the bet that changed everything. In the mid-1960s, Trippe sat down with Boeing's boss, Bill Allen, and basically dared him to build a plane twice the size of anything in the sky. Trippe promised to buy 25 of them before the thing even existed, in an order worth over $500 million. That plane became the Boeing 747, the jumbo jet. Pan Am didn't just order it. Pan Am willed it into being. January 1970, the first 747 enter service on Pan Am's New York to London route. It's a flying cathedral, over 350 seats, a spiral staircase, an upstairs lounge with a piano bar and some cabins. Air travel had never looked like this. Pan Am was the future, and every rival knew it. Here's the logic behind the gamble. More seats means lower cost per seat. Fill a jumbo, and you basically print money on every flight. Trippe was betting that demand for flying would climb forever, so bigger would always win. Reasonable? On paper. But timing is everything. And Pan Am's timing was catastrophic. The 747s started rolling off the line right as the American economy softened and growth stalled. Suddenly, Pan Am owned these enormous, gorgeous machines, and nowhere near enough passengers to fill them. And a half-empty 747 is a financial horror show. You're still burning oceans of fuel, still paying full crews, still hauling hundreds of empty seats across the Atlantic. The exact feature that made the plane brilliant when packed turned it into a bleeding wound when it was flying light. Then October 1973, OPEC's oil embargo. Fuel prices roughly quadruple in a matter of months. For an airline flying the thirstiest planes ever built, half empty, running on debt, this was the asteroid. Pan Am hemorrhaged money. It had bet the entire company on growth that simply evaporated. The jumbo fleet, bought on borrowed money, stopped being a crown and became an anchor chained to the company's ankle. So that's the story everyone tells. Visionary airline, giant planes, unlucky with oil, roll credits. Clean. Except it isn't the real story, because plenty of airlines flew 747 straight through that same oil crisis and came out fine. The oil didn't kill Pan Am. What killed Pan Am was a hole in its map that had been there the whole time. Look at what Pan Am actually was. A world-beating international airline with almost no domestic routes inside the United States. It could fly you to Paris in style, but it couldn't fly you from Kansas City to New York to catch that flight to Paris. It had no feeder network, no home turf. Think of it like a species. Pan Am had evolved into the perfect apex predator for one very specific environment. Long international routes in a tightly regulated market where the government handed out those routes like invitations to a private club. Beautifully adapted, unbeatable in that habitat. And a specialist that perfect is exactly the animal that goes extinct the second the habitat shifts. The habitat shifted in 1978. Airline deregulation. Overnight, anyone could fly almost any route and charge almost any price. The domestic giants, United, American, Delta, had massive home networks quietly funneling passengers into their long flights. Pan Am had nothing like that to lean on. It was completely exposed to the open ocean. Pan Am saw the danger and panicked. In 1980, it bought National Airlines to buy itself a domestic network overnight. It overpaid badly. A bidding war shoved the price up over $400 million. The cultures clashed. The route maps barely stitched together. Instead of a rescue, Pan Am got more debt, more chaos, and planes flying to cities it didn't understand. So the company began selling itself for parts. The The famous Pan Am building towering over Grand Central in New York. Sold. Its prized, hugely profitable Pacific routes sold to United in 1985. Piece by piece, Pan Am auctioned off the very things that made it Pan Am, just to keep the lights on for another quarter. Then December 1988, Pan Am Flight 103 is bombed over Lockerbie, Scotland. 270 people killed. Beyond the horror of it, the brand that had meant safe, glamorous, world-spanning travel now carried a shadow it could never shake. Bookings sank. The end came quietly in December 1991. Pan Am sold its last major asset, the Atlantic routes, to Delta, ran out of cash, and simply stopped. 64 years old, the airline that invented global travel just quit flying right in the middle of the holiday season. So what actually killed it? Not one fuel crisis. Pan Am's fatal flaw was structural, baked in from the top. It bet everything on scale. The biggest planes, the widest reach, the grandest brand, without ever building the boring, unglamorous domestic base that lets an airline survive a bad year. It optimized perfectly for the world exactly as it was, and kept zero cushion for the world it was about to become. The 747 gamble wasn't a mistake because it was bold. It was a mistake because Pan Am had no plan B underneath it. Genius with no margin for error isn't really genius. It's a tightrope with no net. And sooner or later, everyone on a tightrope slips. Pan Am just happened to fall from higher up than anyone else.